be sharing 3 different passages with you this morning. The first one is simply going to introduce the topic about bearing witness. And we have many examples through our scriptures of people who bore witness. In fact, the Bible itself is a witness given by God's people over millennia, all pointing in the same direction, pointing to the gospel of salvation in Jesus Christ and all that we are to expect of God's kingdom, not yet fully realized and yet inaugurated in Him. So to begin, I'd like to read the second half of Psalm 71. Hear the word of the Lord. O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me, until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come. Your righteousness, O God, reaches the high heavens. You who have done great things, O God, who is like you? You who have made me see many troubles and calamities will revive me again. From the depths of the earth you will bring me up again. You will increase my greatness and comfort me again. I will also praise you with the harp for your faithfulness, O my God. I will sing praises to you with the lyre, O Holy One of Israel. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praises to you, my soul also, which you have redeemed. And my tongue will talk of your righteous help all the day long. For they have been put to shame and disappointed who sought to do me harm. May the Lord bless to us the first reading of his word. In the spirit of the psalmist, here is my testimony to the mighty acts of God in my life. I was here 3 years ago in October. It's been 3 years since I've been here. The week I was here, Joan Fong was walking with a cane and complaining of hip pain. And a week later, she found out that she had stage 4 lung cancer. A week after that, I found out that I had stage 3 lung cancer. And the only symptom I had was a cough that wouldn't go away. But that began an amazing right turn in my life. The next 6 months after that were months of exhaustion, fatigue, making friends with a whole bunch of the, as my friend calls, the medical industrial complex in Walnut Creek. I had chemo and radiation from then until Christmas, more chemo in 2014, surgery on March 3rd, 2014 to remove the lobe of my lung that contained the tumor, and then one more round of chemo as a precaution. I was declared cancer-free in the spring of 2014 and remain so to this day. To God be the glory for that. I share that with you because in the midst of all of that, God carried me. There was quite a long time at the beginning of that whole odyssey where I was really not feeling well. I was coughing, just coughing night and day, exhausted. And I knew something was wrong. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. There could have been a few things. I had been to Africa, for instance, just that month, and I wondered if I'd picked something up there. But I had test after test, a couple rounds of antibiotics. Finally, I had a X-ray that showed this mass in my lung and needed to have a biopsy. And the time between the biopsy and finding out what it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days. I got through this whole process, so I hated weekends, because all my tests I had to wait over a weekend to get results. On that Saturday, my husband invited me to come out into the garden and sleep on the hammock while he did some gardening out in the backyard. It was a lovely thing. And you know how when you get in a hammock, It takes a while to kind of get yourself situated exactly right. You feel out of balance. I've even flipped over a couple times. And but on that day, Andy had it all stretched out. I leaned back into the hammock and immediately was in exactly the right, perfect spot. And as I lay down, I looked up and the trees were dappling with sunshine, and I just felt overwhelmed with a reassuring presence of God. And this is before I knew what I had. And it was as if God said, Mary, I'm carrying you now, just like this hammock is holding you up. Do not forget this. And that image was embedded in my heart for all those months that I was in treatment, and for many of those months not knowing how it was going to turn out. God was faithful. God carried me. Even if I were not cancer-free, as Joan is demonstrating to us now, God can still be with us, even in the midst of that kind of calamity. That's my first testimony. One of the unfortunate side effects of that whole adventure was that I developed asthma. I'd had a mild asthma my whole life, but it got really bad. I'm still a little croaky today. I kind of had a bad asthma day on Friday. But among the treatments are various inhalers. If anybody knows anything about the air we breathe, we can open up the airways by breathing in certain substances in different kinds of inhalers. So I was treated with a series of them to find the one that worked right. But over the next year, I began to lose my voice. I would get croaky and hoarse. I'd have a lot of phlegm, and it was just really getting annoying, particularly because I was feeling good and I wanted to sing, which is one of the things that I like to do. And my husband and I were, in 2015, were rehearsing for a choir tour in Europe. And my voice was unreliable. There was one piece I just couldn't sing. It was just not going to work for me to sing that one. And I would never know from day to day whether or not I would have a voice. Complete unreliability. By the end of October 2015, so that's last fall, almost a year ago, my voice was so bad that literally I could open my mouth and nothing would come out. I did an audition for a singing of the Messiah, and in the audition, I had a nice grand piano ready to start. I opened my mouth, nothing came out, and the conductor went, as I did also. Oh, that's up there in most embarrassing moments. Well, we had tried everything. We had changed one medication out that had a side effect of a cough. We had addressed another medical issue that sometimes causes hoarseness. Well, finally, I went at the end of October to my ear, nose, and throat doctor, and I said, okay, I'm depressed. My voice is so bad. I'm not even wanting to talk on the telephone, so you know this is bad. What else is there to try? And he said, well, one of the 2 inhalers you're taking for your asthma, for maybe half the people who take it, vocal problems is a side effect. So we can go off that inhaler and see what happens. I don't know what that's going to do to your asthma. And so here was the choice. Door number 1, keep breathing. Door number 2, start singing, right? I'm going, Lord, I need a third choice here, right? I want to breathe and I want to sing. So I prayed and I went to our prayer ministry that Tuesday night. Monday was the last day I took the inhaler. He said it could be weeks. We won't know whether or not this will work. That Friday, 5 days later, I woke up in the morning and knew immediately my voice was crystal clear. And to celebrate it, I went to the piano and I sang 3 Messiah choruses in a row, cold. And if you've ever sung the Messiah, you know that was hard music. Because it was all there. The Lord had restored my voice. So I give thanks and praise to God for that. And I haven't needed the inhaler. It didn't make my asthma worse. I have not had a problem. That little problem this last Friday is a little problem. I had no problem all year. So praise the Lord for that. All right, so now you think, okay, how many testimonies can she give in one morning? I've got one more for you, the third. On April 12th this year, my husband was commuting to work on his motorcycle. He had gotten off the freeway in Oakland when another motorist ran a red light and collided with him in an intersection. He was thrown 20 yards. He was fully geared up. I've prayed for him as the garage door closes every morning for the last 22 years that he has commuted to work. But he was taken to Highland Hospital. That's the kind of phone call one does not like to get from Oakland Police Department. I'm here at the scene with your husband who's been hit in an accident, and we're taking him to Highland Hospital, and we'll meet you there. We didn't know this then, but in the next day or so, it was determined that he had broken his pelvis and ruptured a knee tendon. He had surgery there in Oakland, was treated there for a week, and then transferred to John Muir, which is where we live, for 2 more weeks in the hospital of rehab. Again, God would not let me sink. You know how in the scriptures it talks about God is the rock beneath our feet? Well, I really felt that God lifted me up, carried me up. Now, Andy's testimony, he's not here today. He's at church, at our home church. He'll tell you what God did for him, but I'm telling you my testimony, how God held me up in the midst of all of this. And so 3 weeks in the hospital, commuting to Oakland, which for us in rush hour is a bad commute. You know about bad commutes. And then coming home for 5 more weeks, he could bear no weight on his legs to allow everything time to heal. And so I was his primary caregiver, which was, I have a whole new appreciation for spouses who take care of their loved one through an illness or through an infirmity of some kind. I had no idea how exhausting it is, but the Lord sustained me. And when it got to the point at 1 or 2 times when it was almost unbearable, we called upon the Lord, and the Lord answered and helped us through those rough patches, to the point now where my husband walked around yesterday all day without a cane, rode his forget the motorcycle, rode his bicycle. Yeah, please forget the motorcycle. Rode his bicycle on his errands, and he returned to work 2 weeks ago. Again, God showed great faithfulness and gave us the opportunity for terrific joy. These are things that we're going to look back on for the rest of our lives as moments, as seasons of time when God did mighty works on our behalf, bringing healing and renewing our hope. And it's amazing to me of the benefits that we have derived from this is our faith has been strengthened, and our friendship circle has enlarged, and our optimism about the future has exponentially grown, because we know that there is nothing to fear, that God is in fact very real and very, very active in our lives. Now you may wonder, as I give this lengthy testimony, what this has to do with the scriptures I'm going to read for you next. It turns out that God has been doing mighty works among his people since the very beginning of time. And it turns out that when God called Israel into being, we're now in the book of Genesis, let's say chapter 12, calls Abraham out of Ur, where's that? It says, I want you to go where I send you. Go follow me to the place I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you, and through you the entire world will be blessed. That began the odyssey of God's hands-on mighty works among his people. And as we advance to the book of Exodus, and this great nation has migrated to Egypt in order to eat because of a famine in the promised land. Now they are under slavery after 400 years. Things have deteriorated, and God calls them out of Egypt, away from Pharaoh, through the magnificent and mighty series of events we know as the Exodus, right? The first big event is crossing the opened Red Sea before the Pharaoh Pharaoh's army could get there. And then they end up on the other side in the Sinai Peninsula. Has anybody ever been there? Have you done a Holy Land tour? I mean, it is a godforsaken place. It's just, there's nothing there. It's desert. And so they start grumbling. Man, if we knew it was going to be this hard, we would have stayed in Egypt and eaten the meat and everything they imagined that they had in Egypt. But no, God said, no, we're still going to the promised land that I will show you. And since you're hungry, I will feed you. So he gives them manna to eat and guides them and shapes them as a people and helps them to understand the nature of God. Help them to understand, I am the one who has gathered you as a people and is holding you together. I am the one who will lead you and empower you and give you the great blessing I promised Abraham. So that whole story unfolds then in the course of what we call the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, starting with Exodus. In the midst of all that, God wanted them to understand the centrality of his place in their midst. And so he gave them instructions as God had been shaping them and leading them along, gave them instructions to build a box. It's essentially a box made of acacia wood and gilded all solidly in gold. I have a very cheap facsimile right here. And in this box, this box, you might have known it as the Ark of the Covenant, but it's also known as the Ark of the Testimony. Aha, or the Testimony. Because the purpose of this box was to contain items of great importance to the people of God as a reminder of God's presence in their midst. I'll tell more about that in a minute. But then it had the mercy seat over it. The lid of this box was called the mercy seat, the place where God resides. This Ark of the Covenant, or Ark of the Testimony, was carried around with the people by the priests throughout their whole exodus from Egypt till it finally came to rest in Jerusalem a long time later. First of all, it was very valuable, right? The gold, so to signify the preciousness and the precious treasure that God was to them. Second of all, it always, because it was central to Israel's life, when they were on the march, it went before them. The priests carried it, and everybody, all 12 tribes, followed. But then when they made camp, it would be situated right in the middle, and all 12 tribes then would be encamped all around it, signifying again, who is at the center of their life? Yahweh God, right? And then lastly, it's simply a reminder then of God's mighty acts in their midst. All was meant to evoke reverence and fear of the Lord, awe over what God had done. So, I'm going to read now Exodus 16, just a portion of it, to kind of get to what's going on with this box. God had sent manna and quail. Now the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it," that's a weight measure, we don't know exactly how much that is, "let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread with which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations." As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. That's the box. The people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan, and all the while carried that reminder. Now, the writer of the book of Hebrews is talking about the worship life of Israel This is in the New Testament now, kind of reminding the people of God that the difference between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, how God acted with the chosen people of Israel, and how that continues now in the way God acts among us all, and makes this comment. So this is from Hebrews 9. Now, even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness, namely a worship center. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. These are some of the worship implements that were carried around by the priests from place to place. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place. So the tent of meeting that could be broken down and carried to the next encampment, this had a courtyard, and then had a first room, the holy place, and then a second room behind the curtain called the most holy place, which had the golden altar of incense and the ark of the testimony, the ark of the covenant, covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna, and also Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Now, the writer of Hebrews has collected more data that goes through the Pentateuch. The manna was placed in the box. The stone tablets Moses brought down from the mountain that had the 10 Commandments written on them, those went in the box. And that's stated in another place in Exodus. And then in Numbers 17, we've got this interesting conversation going on because the people of God are grumbling about their leader. Oh, these guys aren't doing a very good job. And the priests, the Levites, they are just no good. And we don't want to follow them anymore. And God says, hold on. I have anointed these people to be your leaders. But just to prove to you who's really your leader, I'm going to ask the chiefs of every tribe to put a name on their staff, right? And put it in the Holy of Holies, and watch what happens overnight. So Aaron represented the tribe of Levi, and all the other tribes were represented. They put their staffs in there. And then the next morning, they get up, they go in there into the courtyard, and Aaron's staff, unlike any of the others, had budded like a tree and was actually bearing almonds. Okay, now, is that kind of funny? I mean, as if to say, look, I'm not just going to make it glow or something. God said, Aaron's leadership is going to bear fruit in your midst if you will follow him. And it was an anointing of God's on Aaron's leadership as the head priest. Okay, so what do we have here then in this golden box? We've got reminders of God's provision, the manna. That's a great miracle of God. We have the reminder of God's leadership provided to this people. They are not aimless. They are not leaderless. They have Moses and they have Aaron, and that's by virtue of God's anointing. And we have the reminder of God's law, the stone tablets, the 10 Commandments. So that box contained evidence of pivotal moments in the life of Israel that they literally carried around with them. So when we talk about bearing witness to our faith, we're talking about carrying around reminders of what God has done. So here's my box. What's in my box? This is no sacrilege to put reminders of God's mighty acts onto the communion table. I have the backpacking hammock that Andy put out between two trees in our backyard. And I have my score of the Messiah by Handel to remind me of God giving me back my voice. And I have this is actually my motorcycle helmet. Andy's, it had to be put in the trash. As a reminder, I think about having the helmet of salvation. These are my reminders. You are also carrying a gold box with reminders of what God has done in your life. So my question is not, so what's in your wallet? My question is, what's in your box? What has God done in your life that is pivotal, important to the development of your faith? What has God done to heal you? What has God done to comfort you? What has God done to provide for you? What has God done to shape your life? God has been at work. Do you believe that? What would be some of the symbols, like my hammock and my helmet, that would remind you of those moments in your life that God has acted? I want you to think about that. Maybe that's homework at lunchtime today. I'm going to put this right in front. Because we are each called, like God's chosen people, to bear witness, to bear testimony. We do that not just by believing in our heart that God did what God did, but we do this by proclaiming, by sharing, by lifting up the evidence of what God has done. Now, what might that be for you? I've got two examples for you. Excuse me. I've got two examples for you. I've got a friend who took an Israel tour this spring, and it was kind of dicey about whether she could go because she had bumped her ankle. She had fallen on it twice, re-injured it, and it had been like close to a year that she was in a boot, walking with a cane. She was in a lot of pain, and so the question was whether or not she was ready to go walking all over Israel on a tour. She was desperately wanted to go with her husband. She went, and midway through the tour, there was an occasion for her friends now on the tour, this tour group, to pray for her and pray for healing. And if she were here with me today, you would see her glowing face sharing the fact that God healed her ankle, and that was the end of all the trouble with her ankle. Isn't that great? No boot, no cane, no nothing. It was in the way in her suitcase the rest of the way on the tour. So her cane might be her implement. Or my neighbor, John, who lives across the street in Down One, whose wife died 2 years ago, and he is going to turn 92 in a month or two. Tall, skinny guy, warm demeanor, gentle soul. He's been retired for 30 years, right? Andy had just gotten home from the hospital, and then the word had gotten around through the neighbors, and he came to the door holding a posy of geraniums. And he said, Andy came to the door in his wheelchair, and he says, and he talks very, very slowly. He said, I don't know what one guy gives to another when he wants to wish him well. He said, but these were my wife's favorite flowers that I've finally gotten to grow again, so I cut them for you. He said, when you're ready to go for a walk, I'll walk with you, because I think right now our pace would be about the same. So his witness was a handful of flowers. What is it for you? What is it for you? We're going to talk in a moment around this table what it is for the church. But what it is for you is something so personal and so real and so tangible that it can be displayed it can be proclaimed, it can be shown as a way of bearing witness to the faith you have in Jesus Christ, giving witness to the power of God at work in you. Without this, my friends, we have no witness in our community. But with it, we have the powerful, powerful testimony of God's mighty acts that have been given not only to us, but made available to everyone around us, if they would trust God. So I'm going to close by reading again just a couple verses of Psalm 71. O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me, until I proclaim your might to another generation, and your power to all those to come. There is another generation, maybe your age, but the next wave of believers waiting to see what you bring out of your box.